Hey everybody, welcome to another Avid and editing tutorial. This is something that was actually requested by a viewer in the comments and I thought was an interesting idea, so I'm giving it a shot and we'll see how it goes and if it's useful to people. Let me know in the comments how this went because this is kind of different from some of the other tutorials I've done. Those have mostly been nuts and bolts software. Here's how you use Avid, here's how you solve certain problems in it, here's how you work with the media and stuff like that. And I'm going to hit some of that in here, but I'm also going to talk through a little of the creative process because the idea somebody had posted was to do a video that's actually just a recording of an editing session and talk through what I'm doing. So I'm going to talk through the Avid elements and explain here's what I'm pressing, here's what I'm clicking, and you can kind of see what that's doing and how it functions in reality as opposed to just in a tutorial where it's like, okay, here's how you would do this if you wanted to do it. But I'm also going to talk a little bit through the creative process and kind of what I'm looking for as an editor as I'm going through this. And we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's useful to people. So what I have here is a scene from a short film that I did a few years ago. I have all the footage already brought into Avid and transcoded and synced, and there's tutorials on how to do that if you want to do that. So we're starting with the footage kind of already here in a bin, ready to go. And I'm just going to take this footage and throw together a first edit of it and get a sense of how the scene plays out. Obviously, really getting a scene polished takes time. It takes a lot of edits and revisions, and you'd have to see how it plays in the context of the rest of the movie and stuff, and that's beyond the scope of this. But I'll at least put together a first pass at this scene and explain what I'm doing as I go through, and hopefully that's useful to you. First off, I'm just going to make a sequence so I have somewhere to build this, and I'll say draft of bedroom scene. And I just put this in this practice bin. You can see I have over here all my bins already organized and broken up the way that I want them. And so I'm just going to be working out of this one bin that's for the particular scene here, this scene 3 bedroom night. Okay, and one other thing I wanted to note I did here is in the Avid interface, usually it likes to keep everything in this big window. And if I adjust the size of one thing, something else will get bigger or smaller along with it. Because they're all kind of connected in this single large window. And what I've done here is I've floated one of my bin windows, or I guess technically bin container window, but floated one of these as a separate window. And as we get into editing this, I'll show you the reason for that, just so that I can work a little more easily with the keyboard. There's a keyboard shortcut I love to use to jump between windows, and it doesn't work if the things you're trying to jump between are in the same actual window. So my composer, my timeline here, and the effects palette here that are all really part of one window. I can't use this to jump between those, but since this is a separate window, I can kind of bounce back and forth easily using this. So I'll show you how to do that. Just move this over just a little bit to make sure I can kind of see everything I want. Normally, if I was editing this, I would have it set up on dual monitors, but we're doing a single monitor here for recording purposes. Okay, so we got everything set up the way we want here. One other thing I want to do is I know that my raw footage here actually has a couple extra audio tracks in some of the clips. So I'm just going to go to my sequence and just add a couple more audio tracks so that there's always places for all these audio tracks to go in case there's something I want in them. So I'm just going to Command U twice to get myself a couple more audio tracks. So now my raw clips that had 1 video and 6 audio tracks always have somewhere to go. I might need more audio tracks as we go through this. I definitely would if I was finishing this out, but in this case, I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of audio overlapping or anything like that. I'm just going to kind of rough out the scene, so maybe that'll be enough. So I can always just double click on a clip to bring it up in my window here. This one already was. Something that's just good to know, a shortcut, is if I'm in the bin here, I can use my arrow keys to move down or move up. And if I just hit return on one of them, it'll bring that into the source side of my composer window. So if I hit return here, it pops up that clip. And actually, let's go back and I want to start with take 1. And here's the shortcut I mentioned. I'm going to use Command tilde, which toggles me between windows, and it's always going to jump me first back to the last place I was. So I'm over here in my composer right now. I can look through this clip, right? But let's say I want to load up that first take. I'm going to Command tilde, takes me back over to this bin container. I'm just using the mouse to sort of highlight. You can see it took me over here. This is now highlighted and this kind of lit up bright white. And I can use my arrow keys to go to the clip I want and hit return. And that's going to load that clip back up and bring me back over to the composer. So I can quickly look through clips, load the clips I want without having to go to the mouse. And you may remember from some of my other tutorials that I really don't like having to use the mouse. That's going to slow me down. Okay, so I'm ready to edit here. I'm going to use my JKL keys and kind of just have my fingers on that. So I can use, as always, L to play forward, R to play backwards, K to pause it. If I hit a button multiple times, it'll play in fast motion. And right above those are my I and O. So I'm going to be kind of ready to mark an in and out. And again, this is just a first pass through this, so I'm kind of looking at the footage as it goes and watching through all this. Something you should do that we're not going to take the time to do here, but really as an editor, you should watch through all your footage before you start editing. Just kind of know what you have and know what's in here. In this case, I already know this footage. I've edited this movie in the past, so I'm not going to take the time to watch through it all and then start editing. We'll kind of edit live as we're watching through it, but I did want to make that note that you really should be watching all the stuff before you just jump right in on editing, although that's what everyone wants to do. Okay, so I'm going to use L, play forward here, and I'll hit L again to speed through the slate because I don't really need that. And then something I like to do when I'm looking at a clip for the first time is I'm just going to kind of mark in and outs as I go on things that I might use. Now I can see over here, this shot there are 7 takes of, and I'm guessing that probably the first one, not everything went great. We're probably going to find one of the later takes maybe is better. But even as I'm going through this, I'm going to at least mark a rough in and out of like something I may want to use from this to see. So as soon as I'm past my slate here, I'll start by just marking an in point, and then I'm going to kind of let it play and see what happens in the scene. Okay, play with the dinosaurs. Okay, so just pausing here for a second. So I'm looking, and you'll just see I'm going to move the in point a couple of times as it goes. I'm waiting until it looks like the action's kind of starting. So you saw the camera was still finding its frame there and still talking with the actors. Don't look at her. Can your dinosaurs attack her, Ben?
Hey, what are you guys doing? You know you're supposed to be in bed. Get all the way in bed, Ben.
This is what you get when you're working with kid actors sometimes. All right, so hopefully we're gonna have a better take of that. You know, the camera move wasn't quite great. It took him a while to get into bed. Maybe we like that little joke moment where she's like, get all the way into bed or not. I know for this particular movie, it's more serious. This is a dramatic piece, so that's probably not the take I'm going to want to use, but I've got it marked now. If I want to come back here, I kind of have a sense of at least within this overall timeline, it's about here to here is kind of the main action. And I may not want to use that all the way through. In fact, I'm already noticing, okay, I like seeing them, but I want to see who this person is off screen talking. So I'm probably going to cut back over to her to see who's over there, and then maybe cut back over to there. So maybe I'll use a part of this, then cut back, then use another part later. But I've got kind of this section marked here. If it turns out this really was the best take that, you know, maybe I want to kind of start with and figure out what part of that I want to use. Let's look at some of the other takes. I'm going to command tilde myself back over to my bin and use my down arrow to just go to the next take, hit return, and load that up. And let's say, hypothetically, this had been like left in the middle of a take. I just want to get back to the beginning. You can always use your home key to just go back to the start of a take. So I'm going to do that. And you know, kind of fast forward through the slate here. And just marking some in points, kind of looking for where it seems like the action started.
Rory, don't look at her. Look at the toys. Good job.
What are you guys doing? Get all the way in bed, Ben. It's not time to be a lizard. Be a boy.
And some great improv from Brina there, who I love working with. So that one was better. They were kind of like playing at the start. You know, move kind of got up where it needed to. I like that they kind of, as soon as she said something, they kind of ran off to the beds. And again, these are creative choices. You might make different ones. I know kind of where this is fitting in the movie and kind of what we were looking for with it. I still don't like him really acting weird once he gets up there, because this really isn't a major scene in the movie. The moment we're trying to get to here is kind of the end moment where she has this nice moment with the daughter on the bottom bunk. And so I don't kind of need this kid acting weird part. So I'm probably, again, not going to use this take. I like this better than take one, though. So I'm kind of keeping in my head I like that better. Okay, let's take a look at another take. I'm going to talk less through these and just kind of quickly go through a few takes and see if we can find one that we like.
What are you guys doing? That's right, get in bed. Get down, get in bed. Ben, get in bed, silly. Get in bed. Lay down.
Okay, so that's kind of going nowhere, but I like the first part of this. You know, I like they're playing, we see her step into the frame, which we didn't see so much in the other takes, so I like that a little better. And she says
What are
something
you
to
guys
kind of
doing?
immediately run off to their bed. So I think the
That's
first
right,
part of
get
this
in
might actually be something useful. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in my timeline for now, and we'll see if I find a better take later, but this seems like this might be something and I can kind of cut around back to her. I'm setting the out point here
Bed.
because, again, that's O for out point, I for in point, conveniently right above my JKL, so I can be kind of scrolling through this as I want and using I and O. The camera's kind of taking a while as the kid is getting up to that top bunk and the camera is panning up a little slowly. So I don't quite like that second part of this. It just occurred to me one other thing I should have done before I set up this demo session was put in some masking in Avid. This is a project that was shot 16:9, which is what this aspect ratio is. But the project I know is going to be finished to a CinemaScope aspect ratio, 2.39 to 1, meaning the top and bottom of the image are going to be masked off. That's going to happen at the end stage of this when we're outputting, but I'd like to know as I'm editing kind of what is the actual frame going to be like. Maybe there's things in the top or bottom of the frame that I don't like, but if I know that they're going to be matted out and not seen, that's not such a big deal. So I'd like to at least have a sense of what that's going to be. Obviously, in post, if I know I'm going to be masking the top and bottom, I have some flexibility to shift things up and down a little bit to adjust for that. Like in this case, if I ended up using this shot, right now, the kid up here on the bed is probably going to be cut off by that mask, so I might actually need to shift this downward in post if I want to be able to kind of see him getting up into the bed there. But I'd like to at least know kind of what I'm going to be dealing with. So let's go ahead and set that up. This is normally something you do at the beginning of the project, and I just forgot to do for this demo here. So I'm going to bring up my preferences, Command, comma, and you'll see on this first tab, Format, right here we have mask margins, and I can pick what the aspect ratio for this project is going to end up being. Now this is not going to stretch my footage. These are masks, so it's just going to block off the parts that would be covered. And I know this is a 2.39 to 1, so I'll go ahead and set that. Okay, and close this. Now notice nothing happened. What I've done is set the mask margin for the project. I actually have to set that separately for my source window and my record window, how I want it to use that information. For instance, maybe I always like to see my full frame when I'm looking at raw footage, and then when I get into stuff that's been edited in, that's where I want to see it masked or something like that. The way I can do this is just right click on one of these windows. So I'll do it on my source window here. And you'll see there's this option that says target mask. And I could do a full black mask, like actually just mat that out, like what the aspect ratio is going to be in the final. And you can see, in fact, he is getting cut off here, so that's not great. But when I'm looking at raw footage here, I really kind of do want to see what's under here to know, like, well, if this is not great, but I like everything else about this shot, if I just shift it down and I can see him there, great. So I'd like to know what's behind these. So I'm actually going to switch this to mix to black. What that's going to do is put these markers in so I can see where the masking would be, but I can also see the full frame and kind of get a sense of what all the footage is there. Again, this is user preference, whatever makes the most sense to work to you. Some people like to work full frame. Some people like the masking right from the beginning. This is kind of the best thing for me so I can get a sense of what the frame is going to be, but also know what footage is there that I might be able to shift something up or down to adjust if I need to. Okay, so I said we liked the first part of this. I'm not convinced we're going to use this. I want to look at these other takes. Maybe there'll be something better, but I'm going to go ahead and put this into my sequence so we have it, because I did like this of the ones we've seen so far. This works pretty well in the beginning at least. So I'm just going to push B to do an overwrite edit and throw it into my sequence. If I pushed V as in van to do an insert, it wouldn't make a difference at this point because there was nothing in the sequence. And now we've got this one clip, and you can see it move my timeline cursor here to the very end. So when I go to put in the next clip again, if I do a V or B, it's not going to matter because it's just going to keep appending things to the end until I move this cursor somewhere else. Okay, so I put that in. Let's take a look at some more takes of this, and I'm going to go through this very quickly. I might not actually look at all the takes, but I'll just command tilde back over here, load up the next take. And I can see from the length of this clip, that's kind of a bust. So let's just skip that one, go to the next take. Okay, this looks more promising. Let's see what's going on here.
are you guys doing? Supposed to be in bed.
Sorry, back to back.
Back to Hey, come on, guys, back down.
Oh, sorry,
Come back down.
sorry,
We're gonna do
back
what
down.
we're
Camera issue or resetting. Looks like camera keeps rolling.
What are you guys doing? Good.
That's not bad. I kind of like that one. Let's throw that one in as a possibility as well. Next take.
Okay.
Girl was looking at the camera.
What are you guys doing?
Okay, I like the speed of their movement there, but it took the camera forever to tilt up. I don't like that. Let's try one more. It's got a little over eager. Right before she comes in, endpoint.
What are you guys doing?
That's not bad either. I think a couple of those are usable. If this was the real movie and we were really editing this to see what we wanted to use, I would look a little more carefully through these and try to find the best. But for now, I think the one we put in previous to this take 5, I think seemed like that was maybe the best, or at least it's a good one. It'll give us at least a rough sense of the scene. So what I'm going to do is hit escape, which is going to switch me from the source monitor over here to the record monitor over here. Okay, so now I'm controlling this monitor, which is also controlling the timeline. So I liked this take I put in here. I think I like that better than this first one we put in. Again, real world editing, I would take the time to make sure I am having in the one that I really like, but we're just kind of doing this quick here. And so now I have this controlled. I could go back to the beginning of my sequence using the home button, or I could hit A and jump myself back a couple cuts. And I just want to get rid of this clip because I think I'm going to keep this one in here. So a couple ways I could do this. The quickest is I can use my clip select, which is the T button. Now the problem here is right now it's going to try to select the places where there's cuts in all the tracks. And the problem is I got this V2 and V3, which don't have anything in them. So if I hit T, it's going to select the whole sequence, which I don't want to do. And as it turns out, I don't actually want this V2 and V3 track, so I could just delete them, but I'll just turn them off for now, like that. And now if I hit T, that's just going to select that clip. So you can see it put an in point at the beginning, put an out point at the end of that. Then I'm just going to hit X to take that clip out. So now I've got this clip that I think I liked. He walks in, climb up. Okay, that looks good enough for our purposes now. Okay, so let's go on to see what our next shot is. Okay, this looks like this is going to be her coming in. I think what I want to do, I'm going to hit escape, go back over here, is I want a little bit of them playing first. So I don't have to do this, but I'm going to hit H just to put a marker here, split this clip that you can see I just split that in two. So I want a little bit of them playing before, and then we're going to show her walking in, maybe in this shot.
Sound. Action.
What are you guys doing? It's time for bed.
What's happening now?
Cut.
Yeah, little movie magic there. Yeah, so the kid's supposed to be climbing up into the bunk, and you can see over here, they're actually trying to fake some blankets and stuff moving, and you actually see a crew member's arm come in, and the kid runs in here, so obviously not usable for that part of this. But I have kind of a sense of what happens in this shot. And I'm already thinking a little bit about like, okay, so I've got her coming in and kind of watching them. So maybe I don't want to start with them playing. Maybe I want to start with her walking in and kind of seeing like it's her perspective of them and kind of then show her walking into this frame. Then maybe I cut back to her or maybe I stay on them. I don't know. But just think about what options I have. Okay, so this take is no bueno, at least for the second half of it. And let's see if we have a better take. So command tilde back over here, down arrow, return.
Sound.
And I accidentally was fast forwarding too far and went here, but I had marked an endpoint as we played through kind of the beginning of this. So I'm just going to hit Q, go back to my endpoint.
Sorry. Action.
What are you guys doing? It's time for bed.
Cut.
It's like, are you gonna tell me?
Okay. So the first part of this was actually, I think, pretty good. Kind of walks in,
It's time for bed.
looks at them. I don't know if I like the it's time for bed. I kind of like that they just says, what are you doing? They immediately scurry. So I'm going to mark this kind of first chunk here and I'll insert it in here. We may keep it, we may not, but I'm going to hit V to kind of put it in the middle of that stuff we have now. Safekeeping there. And if I go through here, you see right now I have kind of them playing at the beginning. Then we got this, and then we got the second part of this clip. Obviously, this is not all matching up right now. I'm just kind of looking through for some pieces I want. Okay, so let's take a quick look at a couple. Maybe we don't need to look at all these takes, maybe. But it seemed like there was something that was supposed to happen at the end there that didn't, so let's do one more.
Action.
By the way, you'll notice as I'm watching through this, I can just keep setting endpoints. So I kind of like set one at the beginning here and like, okay, wait, this says action. Set another one and just keeps moving. I don't need to stop to do this. I can just
What are you
keep
guys
playing.
doing? You're supposed to be in bed. Good night.
Mommy, can you hold my hand?
Sure.
Cut.
Okay, I like the first part of that. I kind of like her
What are you guys doing?
reaction there.
You're supposed to be in bed.
And then even the way she says you're supposed to be in bed there, I think kind of works. I said maybe I don't like that line. Maybe I do. I don't know.
night.
Now we see what's supposed to happen at the end here. She says good night, goes out, turns off the light, and then someone's going to stop her. And here you see we have a focus issue. She doesn't quite come back into focus. So for camera reasons, that second part of that take isn't something we want to use. But that first part was okay. So I'm going to dump that in here as well with a V. And let's see if maybe we can find a take. I'm going to skip past the first part of this because we have a couple options already that we seem to like for that first part. Again, if it were real edit, we'd watch through all these. We'd make sure we find exactly the best performance that we can or what's kind of hitting the right beat. But in the interest of time here, let's take a look at this second part though and see if we can find one where that second part, the focus is right and everything in case we want to use that.
No more climbing out of bed. Good night.
Mommy, can you hold my hand, please?
Sure.
Cut.
It was okay. I wasn't super sold on it. One we like better. Again, I'm just going to kind of fast forward through the second part of this. Okay, she didn't like her performance there, so we'll start that over again.
I want to do that again. Okay. No more climbing out of bed. Good night.
Mommy, could you hold my hand, please?
Sure.
I like that. Let's go ahead and use that. So I'm going to hit escape back over to my record window and timeline here, and I'm going to hit end to go to the end of this sequence when they're in bed, because I think that's probably when I would want to cut to this part here at the end, and let's drop that in. Looks like we have a few more takes of that. We'll just skip them, and let's see what else we got. Okay, I think this is the last shot in this scene. I chose a short, simple scene for demo purposes. This last scene is over here with the daughter in bed. So what's happened is, let's go through here, turns off the light. The daughter says, you know, can you come sit with me? And so she walks back over here and she's going to sit down with the daughter. And that's how the scene plays out. Okay.
Marie, can you say mommy can come please sit with her? Look at her. You asked her to hold your hand?
Sure.
Okay, that is what it is. Let's take another take. Rory, can you ask her to hold your hand again?
Mommy, can you hold my hand?
Sure.
Okay, and I can tell you in reality what I'm looking for here is, because it's a static shot, the focus and the framing are going to be kind of the same on all of them. So I'm just kind of looking at the performance and thinking about what do you want out of your actors at this point. I happen to know, because I'm familiar with this footage and have looked through it all beforehand, that there's one where I like the performance better, where the girl kind of gives her mom her hand and then kind of like rolls over in bed, and I just liked that moment.
Action.
Okay, can you say, Mommy, can you hold my hand for a minute?
Mommy, can you hold my hand for a minute?
Sure.
And give her your right hand. Okay. Close your eyes and go to sleep. Yeah, I think I like that. Let's see if there's one better. So just hitting B to edit that in. You can actually see this one had an additional track of audio. So when I put that in, it just created a track. Let me undo that. You can see there's an additional track of audio. There was not one in the sequence here. And so when I put it in, it actually just auto-created that A7 track to give me a place for that audio to go. Oops. Okay, so last take.
Action.
All right, can you say, can you hold my hand for a minute, please, Mommy?
Mom, can you hold my hand for a minute, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I like both their performances there. I think that's the keeper. So let's actually go back into the timeline and go back a cut with A, hit T to select that previous one I put in, and hit X to take it out because I don't want it anymore. I want this new one, and hit B to put that in. Okay, now we've got a very, very rough version of this scene together. I'm going to Command S just to save things because I'm always paranoid about things getting lost. Home button, back to the start. And by the way, I'm trying to remember to say all the keyboard shortcuts, but I really am not touching the mouse very much other than when I'm using it for demo purposes to kind of point at things. In terms of the actual editing, this is all happening just with the keyboard, which is one of the things I like about Avid is you have that ability to do that and work really efficiently when you learn your keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so just kind of see how this is roughly playing out. I'm going back to the beginning and let's kind of play through it.
What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing?
And I think just looking at these back to back here, I like the kind of line on this second one. So I'm going to put a cut there. There's kind of a faster way to do this, but just kind of see what I'm doing is I'm going to keep the second half of this and delete the first half of this. And then in this first take, I like the first part where she kind of walks in and is looking, kind of looks around the corner a little bit and comes through there. So I'm going to get rid of the second part of that. So I'll keep the first part of this and the second part of the second take. And then what I'm going to do here is just mark an in point there, mark an out point here, and just get rid of all that stuff with an X. There is a quicker way I could have done this is I don't need to hit H to put these cuts in. I could have just, when I realized I wanted to just keep the second half of this clip, just marked an out point here, gone back and marked an in point here and cut those. But I was just, for demo purposes, trying to be a little more clear about what I'm doing. So now I've got those parts I want to cut out marked. But now I've got a jump because we've got kind of her coming in here and then jumps right to her watching them. So, of course, what we want to do here is I think get her stepping into frame here. So let's do something a little bit different. Steps into frame like almost right away here. I'm going to want to actually give a couple more frames. So I'm going to hit U, go into my trim mode, hit right bracket so that I'm just working on the right side of the cut. I'm leaving this shot alone for now and just working here. And then I'm going to back up a little bit Depending what your settings are, you might have JKL editing turned on so that I can actually play one way or the other and it's changing things live as I'm just playing with L forward or J backwards. If you don't have that turned on, I'm going to undo all that. You can use your trim commands. So if you're using the default shortcuts, they're towards the bottom right of your keyboard, M, comma, period, / and just kind of trim this. And I want to trim it back a little bit. So I'm just going to hit M, trim myself back like 1/3 of a frame. I think it's about what I want. Now, what you'll notice is this other track over here just went out of sync because this clip has that extra audio track that these ones don't, and I'm not cutting there. So a couple ways I could keep that from happening. The sort of brute force approach would be turn this track back on, hit H to make a cut in the filler here. So you can see this is actually now 2 different clips, even though they're both filler. So now there's a cut on that track. So now if I go into trim mode, it's going to trim that clip as well, even though it's just trimming filler on track A7. And so now if I'm JKL trimming, or if I use, M and go back a few frames, it's going to keep things in sync. So that's one way to do it. The easier way in a situation like this, and I pointed that out because you always want to be aware of like, what's the way I can do this and make absolutely sure that I'm manually doing it and it's working, because I don't like to trust Avid to always just do the right thing on its own. But in this case, I'm confident this will work. I'm going to turn on my sync lock for these tracks. That's going to say keep all these tracks in sync if you can. And this is not foolproof. It doesn't always work. If you have some cuts where things are overlapping multiple shots and there's not a clear way to know what you should be keeping in sync or not, it's not always going to work. In a simple case like this where it's just shot, 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 these will work fine. And I'm just going to keep everything in sync. So if I click on the sync lock button here, the sync lock is this little slash. And if I click on it on the timecode track, that's just going to turn on for everything. So it's just going to try to keep everything in sync, which for me right now is fine. So now if I go back into trim mode, even though this A7 track is turned off, if I do some trimming, you'll see that it's keeping this A7 track here, this last audio clip, in sync, even though I'm ostensibly not trimming on that clip because it's going to extend this filler to keep things in sync. So that's what the Avid sync locks are going to do. That's the easiest way to do it and normally will work fine. You do want to be aware of the brute force approach of, putting in cuts and making sure you're trimming exactly the stuff you want to trim to keep things in sync if you're working with more complicated edits. Okay, so now we got a little bit kind of as she walks into frame. And I think what I want to do as I'm looking at this, I think I want to start with the kind of empty room. We don't know what's going on. Maybe we'll have some off-screen audio of them playing. See her coming in. And then we're going to jump to this part where they're playing. She kind of walks into frame, and then we'll use the second part of this shot where she says that to them, and then they're going to, run to their beds. Okay, so I'm going to put a cut here with H, and that's cutting all my active tracks, which in this case is all the tracks that has anything on it. And in this case, I am going to use my mouse. There's other ways I could do this, but in this case, this actually would be the easiest. And what I want to do is just take this clip here, which I have my sync locks on. So when I clicked on it, selecting all of those, if I have my sync locks turned off and I click one of these, it would just pick whatever clip I had. My shortcut for that is semicolon. Here's the indicator for whether it's on or off. So I'm going to leave it on. And I'm just going to take this and I want to put it between these 2 clips. So we're going to start with this clip. In fact, let's get rid of this clip right at the beginning. G to clear my in and out. I'm just going to click over here on this clip, T to select it, X to cut it out. Okay, so we're going to start with this clip, and I want to move this piece in between these 2. So I can grab this clip and move it. Now right now I am in overwrite mode, so if I drag this back here, it's going to leave this gaping hole here and actually cut off some of the footage that I think I might have wanted here. So I'm going to undo that, Command Z on a Mac. And instead I want to switch myself to insert or splice in mode. And on my keyboard, I've mapped those to E and R. So I'm going to press R to turn off my overwrite mode and E to turn on my insert mode. You can see the little indicator here. I can have them both on at the same time. So you can see here there's the yellow and the red. So I have both modes active. And in this case, it depends where I grab this. So if I zoom in here, you can see if I grab a clip on the bottom, it's going to be insert. If I grab a clip on the top, it's going to be overwrite. So I can have both active at once. I myself find that requires far too much fine motor control, so I'm just going to turn off the overwrite mode and just leave on insert mode so I can grab this wherever I want and scoot it here. And I'm going to hold down command to make it jump to cut so that I don't accidentally like put it, here with just a few frames of the shot. Well, see it better if I do it that way. I might end up with just not quite hitting exactly where I want. If I hold down command, it's going to jump right to that cut. So now we might have something that looks more like the order I was thinking of.
What are you guys doing? You're supposed to be in bed.
Okay, so that's the general idea. We're going to come back and trim that up just a little bit, but let's see what happens here.
What are you guys doing?
Okay, and I'm looking at my footage, and after she says her line here,
You're supposed
she
to be in
watches them
bed.
scatter. Her eyes follow him up, so I'm going to grab a little piece of this shot where they kind of scatter.
Doing?
In fact, I don't need the beginning of this, so let's just trim this down. So U to go into my trim mode, right bracket to select I just want to work on the right. I can use P to select the left side, or left bracket to select both sides. Just want to work on the right, and I'm just going to trim off a little beginning of this, and I want to kind of get to where they're starting to run there. And they start going, and then this looks like a good place to kind of end this for a moment and cut to where eyes kind of start following them up. So I'm just going to take this and, again, using my insert mode, and I'm holding down command to snap to the cut here. And so now I have something.
You're supposed to be in bed.
Like that. Can't trim it up, but right ballpark. Okay, and she watched them get up, and now there's that part where he kind of flops his arm right at the top of the scene. I kind of like that. That might be a good kind of end beat for this. So let's keep that. So I'm going to put an out point there. A back to the previous cut. In point here. Now, this is a little weird in Avid. It still remembers I had this clip selected last, so this is still highlighted, but I have my in and out marked here. So if I hit X, even though this is highlighted, it's going to cut out what's between the in and out mark, which is what I want it to do. So I did that. We got them going through there. They come up, and he flops his arm down.
No more climbing out of bed. Good night.
Mommy?
Okay, and obviously we'd have to ADR this line or find a good take of the little girl's line from one of the shots. Didn't sound like we had a good take of that, so it's probably going to be an ADR or a wild recording we're going to need to get. In fact, yeah, I'm guessing if I go up here, these are some wild lines of the kids because the kids' audio wasn't great there. Okay, so she's going to walk back over here, which means we kind of want to start this kind of as she's coming in here. So let's do an out point there. O, A to go back, I for in point here. And actually I want to also cut this track here, which was turned off because I had been trimming on these other tracks. So I could click on this to turn it on, but that's going to require use of a mouse, which we know I like to avoid where I can. So one of my favorite shortcuts is just Command A, turn on all the tracks. That way they're ready to go. The converse of that is Command Shift A if you want to turn off all your tracks. So like let's say that I had all my tracks on except for this one, like I just did. And let's say I actually just wanted to do something with the video and I don't want to affect the audio at all. I could go through and kind of manually turn these all off. Quicker way would be Command Shift A, turn them all off, and then just hit 8 to turn on my video track so that I'm just working on that track. But anytime I'm going to cut out a chunk here and I want to affect all tracks, Command A is great. Immediately highlights everything. Hit X, take that out, and let's kind of play around this cut. That's not bad. I'm kind of fast forwarding through this, and then we would kind of keep the scene however long we want, and we need to see how it cuts into the next scene and stuff. Let me go back to the very beginning of the scene for a minute, and let's just try to trim this up a little bit better, even though this is a first rough pass, just so it plays a little more smoothly. Just kind of looking. Okay, so she comes in here. I'm going to go into trim mode and just kind of play with these a little bit. So I think maybe I want to cut a little bit off the end of this shot, like not let her get quite as far into the room here. So I'm going to hit P to go to the left side of the cut and then just back this off a few frames. I'm using the comma key to do that. And you'll notice even though I'm not officially trimming on track A7, it is still keeping it in sync because I have these sync locks on. Okay, and then I'm going to hit spacebar to play this around the cut and kind of see how that looks. I think maybe I took off a little too much there. Let's let her get a little further in. I'm going to go to the right side with the right bracket and trim a couple frames off of that so she's a little closer to walking in, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, that's ballpark. Now I want to go to the next cut. I could go out of trim mode, go to the next cut and go back in. Easier is I'm just going to hit S and go forward to the next cut, staying in trim mode. So I was here, now I'm here. And I think I want to get kind of where she's like just starting to come into frame here. Then I'm going to go to the right side and get her kind of like folding up her arms like that. Let's see what that plays like.
What are you guys doing? You're so
Okay, so I like this cut now.
What are you guys doing?
Feel like her
Yeah, you know-
positioning and
What are you guys?
stuff match there, but now I feel like we're not on the kids very long. So I'm going to go back to the previous cut, go to the right side and just back this up some more so we can get a little bit more on the kids. And again, this might be something, you know, as we're really polishing this, you might find you want to go to a different cut. We might want one shot for just the one where them playing here before she walks in is the best. And maybe there's a different take that's better for that moment where her shoulder comes into frame and a different one for where they're scattering from the ground. You want to look at all your takes and find the best version of every bit of the scene, even if it's splicing together parts from a whole bunch of different takes. But since we were just doing this quickly, we just kind of grabbed a large chunk mostly of one take. Okay, let's see if that screws up this first cut.
What are you guys?
It feels a little awkward. I probably want to go back and look and see if we have a take where she kind of pauses a little more here at the door to give us that second to see what they're doing before she
What are you guys
continues in.
doing? You're supposed to be in bed.
Okay, and I think here it looks like
Be in bed.
her eyes started going a little too quickly, so I'm going to go to the left side with P and just back this up a couple of frames.
Doing? You're supposed to be in bed. Doing? You're supposed.
Or something like that. U to get back out of trim mode.
No more climb.
Okay, this is minor, but I felt like kind of hung on this end of this shot for too long, so I'm going to go back into trim mode and just trim a little bit off the end of this.
No more climbing out of bed.
Yeah, that feels better. And then the rest of this we already looked at and played fine. So this is obviously a very rough first version of this. I'm not happy with how a lot of this plays right now, but hopefully that gives you a sense of kind of what you're looking for is just putting together a scene and how to use the keyboard and the Avid shortcuts to make that work out. I hope that was useful. This was, like I said at the beginning, a different kind of video to do. Let me know what you thought of it. If there's other things you'd like to see, I'm always open for suggestions on things that would be useful for me to do quick little tutorials or videos on. If you are curious and want to see how this scene actually plays out, you can actually watch the video. It's done with its festival run and available online now. I'll put the link in the description below and you can go watch the movie and see how this scene actually did end up being edited when all was said and done. Hope that was useful. As always, like and subscribe and see you next time.